Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
This interview is being held at the home of Dana Evans, 102 South 10th Street, Marshall, Illinois, on the afternoon of December 6, 2001. This is Judy McConkey, the interviewer. To begin with, Dana, I'd like to ask you, when and where were you born?
I was born in West Terre Haute, Indiana, on August the 23rd, 1908. My father was Ernest Everett Evans. My mother was Molly Cooper Evans.
This interview is being held at the home of Dana Evans, 102 South 10th Street, Marshall, Illinois, on the afternoon of December 6, 2001. This is Judy McConkey, the interviewer. To begin with, Dana, I'd like to ask you, when and where were you born?
I was born in West Terre Haute, Indiana, on August the 23rd, 1908. My father was Ernest Everett Evans. My mother was Molly Cooper Evans. High school, and he attended that. And then he became a sub-postmaster for the West York district. And at this time, his schooling gave him the right to write for a teacher's exam, and he passed the teacher's exam. But he did not teach. He decided to come to Marshall, and he learned telegraphy under 2 or 3 people in Marshall. And then about that time, in 1903, he was married then here in Marshall. He and mother were married here in Marshall. And so that was the determination of him becoming an operator, telegrapher. Then he pursued that employment for 35 and a half years. But of course, it entailed him moving later on to another place. But that was a very, very interesting place because he bought the land which surrounded the tower. And we were on the National Road, the old 40, and behind us was the Pennsylvania Railroad. And it was only a short distance between the two. So that going to high school in Casey, and we all grew up there until we sought employment or went someplace else.
You talked about the tower. What specifically is the tower that you're referring to?
Well, the tower is a 2-story building, and these towers used to be situated about 20 miles apart on the Pennsylvania Railroad. These towers and towers in Casey and Terre Haute and all along to St. Louis. It was the St. Louis Division. So these towers were very, very important, the small towers, because they dealt with the railroad from directions given by the dispatcher in Terre Haute, Indiana. And this particular tower only had the 2 levers to pull. Now, levers in that time were were very difficult to pull. When he left West Terre Haute, this tower was situated on two railroads. That is, one railroad crossed another. It was called the interlocking plant. Was right in the tower, and when the operator pulled the lever, you moved a switch and pulled the rails apart, maybe a block down the railroad, so that my father became very well. It was hurting his back, so that he decided to move. And this tower was one that had only the two levers. Now, since we lived only 2.5 blocks from the tower, we were, as children, there many, many times, and many activities went on on the tower. We were allowed to come down most any time, and we went down a little lane from our house, climbed over the fence, and we were at the tower. And my father was always on the alert for everything that's going on, because just behind the tower he could look along this stretch of land, only a few yards, and see US 40 with the traffic. He could look to the left, or to his right, and see the schoolhouse where we were going to school. It determined a lot about what we did as children. We were never allowed to play in the snow, as many of the children did. So we even had to play tag over the schoolhouse and stay on the other side of the schoolhouse from where Dad could view us from the tower. He gave us directions of all kinds, and we were very much controlled as children from the time we left home till we got to school, and so in the evening. Now, he went to work as an operator there, and it was the first trick that he worked. That was from 7 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he didn't get to see us come home from school, but he did watch us a great deal. We were never allowed to stay on the tower. When the trainmen would come up, they would come up as the trains were halted there on the siding, which was there also, and they would come to the tower. So my father would say, "I think you better go home, you children better go home," because they used some language that he didn't quite approve of. So that it was a very controlled situation.
Well, that's interesting. Are the towers still standing? Are any of the towers still standing?
No, many of these towers are gone. In fact, it's controlled very much from Terre Haute. It's very different in that way. The sidings are even gone from the railroad track. And for a while, they moved the tower from where it was to a mile east of there, even, to a place called DuPont. And my father had to go a little farther. And then they took that tower away. And that's when he decided to go back and work clear at West Terre Haute, at Vigo Tower, where he'd worked, and across the Wabash River over at Cape Haven, a tower, and with 2 or 3 towers along there, he decided to work for a while. Then, eventually, he decided that he would sell the farm where we lived, the house and all, and he had employment at Altamont, Illinois. And from there, he retired in about 1965, after 35 and a half years.
Well, because you were, or because he worked for the railroad, did that give you a lot of chances to ride trains? Did you go many places on the trains at that time when he was working for the railroad?
We did. This was a time when the railroads were the place to go, the way to travel. And we had passes, and my father took advantage of that. We went on trips as children, young children, to Niagara Falls. Before I was 6 years old or so. He took 2 or 3 of us now on this trip to Niagara Falls. Then he would go to Pittsburgh. We'd go to St. Louis on trips. We took trips to Mississippi, and we took many trips to Denver, Colorado to visit. We went to Chicago, and we got passes all the way.
So you did a lot more traveling than most children your age at that time did.
That's true. And I never took advantage of talking about it or using it as theme topics at school. Mm-hmm. I wonder about it now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, back to your childhood. What kind of chores were you asked to do? You said your father kind of kept you under his thumb. Did your mother require you to do many chores around the house?
Well, she should have done more than she did because Mother worked very hard. And Dad was the kind that when he would come home from the tower at 3 o'clock, and he would always feed our chickens, that was his duty. Then he would ask Mother what she wanted from town, and he would go to town and he met many people and made many friends that we had from Casey. As far as doing chores, we dusted and cleaned the house. And Mother, of course, did the cooking. We never learned to cook very much because she didn't have time to teach us.
She probably was a good cook
Oh,
herself.
she was a wonderful cook. That's the way I like things now, the way my mother fixed them.
Did you have any special foods that she fixed you liked?
We always had fried potatoes, just so much, and so I did learn to fry potatoes. We had we had cows across the railroad track was our barn, and we had all the things that you need. We had the garden, we had all the things, so there wasn't anything we didn't need, that we did need.
Since Christmas is coming up, did you have any special Christmas foods that your mother prepared?
I think we would have pumpkin pies, and we would have the big, yams, and of course we had chicken instead of turkey back then. Mother had vegetables from the garden. She always fixed her foods separately. I mean, we did not have a mixture of foods put together.
You didn't have casseroles.
No, we didn't have casseroles, not in those days.
Then did you go in your early years to Casey to school, or did you start at West Terre Haute?
Well, I started at West Terre Haute I was 6 in August, and we didn't move until the latter part of that year. And the schools in West Terre Haute were very crowded then. West Terre Haute by 1905 had 3,500 people, and they had grown from 500 just about 6 years before that. But West Terre Haute was a mining center. It was also a railroad center, and so it developed quite early, and across Ontario, across the Wabash. The bridge was there. My father did a lot of work with the camera, so he would go and take pictures of the bridge. We have many pictures of things around Terre Haute, and so that determined that after we went out to 2.5 miles east of Casey, we went to Yoke School then from the 3rd grade to the 8th. And of course, in those days, I did pass the 8th grade. We wrote on an examination, and you had to pass that before you could go, and it was quite important. Then we went into Casey High School. At first, my brother, as soon as he got to high school, had a car. So then I got to ride to school with him for 2 years. And then I rode with somebody else who was going along. Dad would arrange it, and then I was out of school there. Then Dad had decided, I think, that perhaps I would like to go to college, so he arranged for me to go to Eastern Illinois.
What were your favorite pastimes and leisure activities in your growing up years? Did you go to movies?
Yeah, we went to many movies. Dad was one who enjoyed the movies. From the time I was 6 years old in West Terre Haute, there was a movie called The Jitney then. It only cost a jitney, which was not more than a nickel, probably, for a chocolate. And the jitney, and it was 2 blocks from our house. So we went many times there. Then, living where we did, we went to Terre Haute many times after 3 o'clock when my father was off. Now, he worked 7 days a week for many years, except for taking a vacation perhaps of a week or so. So that was a great deal. We enjoyed music. We had the Victrolas, and as the radio came along, we had that, and then, of course, eventually other things.
Did any of your family play musical instruments?
I would say no. My father sent my sister and me to Terre Haute to take lessons. Helen took lessons on the violin, and I took on the piano. We enjoyed getting on the noon train and riding to Terre Haute, getting to the station, taking the streetcar downtown, going through the dime stores, and eventually going to West Terre Haute, where Helen took of the father, and I took of a daughter there. And we took, I think, all one summer.
Is this
Dad,
piano lessons? Are these piano lessons? Or?
yes, Helen
Okay.
took on the violin, and
Oh,
I took
okay,
on the piano.
okay.
And we were asked to come over whenever she was going to have a special program, but we always managed that we couldn't make it. And Dad did not like to hear us practice, so he'd say, "Now I want you to practice, before I get home." Well, we didn't practice very well, but I think that we did not go ahead. My brother took on the saxophone, so it was a little noisy while we were doing that, but we never really did continue to take lessons much.
You said you went to college after high school. You went to Eastern. Did you have some good experiences there?
Yes, Dad arranged for us and arranged where we would stay, and then we were there for a week or two at a time, and until so we could go home. I was never homesick. We were rooming. We had a room. I roomed with another girl, and it seems strange now that the day that we were off was not Saturday years and years ago, but was Monday that we took off, and I never did know why that was. That for a few years like that. I was situated quite close to the college, and I was on an ordinary four-year course to start with. But and about the second or third year, well, I went 2 years, and then I started teaching. Then after that, I went summers to school for many, many years, and till I got my degree in 1949, and I graduated from high school in 26. So it was, but I took trips and did many other things.
And did you teach all this time?
Yes.
Were you teaching
so
all
I was
this time?
teaching then. So I had quite a few years then before I graduated. And
Did you teach in Casey?
I taught, first I taught a country school. The name of it was Toner, which was 2.5 miles north of our house. I taught there 1 year. And of course, that was only an 8-month school. So then I went to Chicago and worked there in Sears Roebuck in the paint and wallpaper department of a store at Canal and Home. And I worked about 6 weeks that summer. Then I got a job, and that country school teaching was just wonderful. I remember Mr. Bright, who was county superintendent and late chair marshal. He came to visit, the country school. And I had all the experiences that a country school teacher would have with 27 pupils there. I had no trouble. I enjoyed it. We had the children go across the road and play in the woods, no accidents. Halloween happened. It was kind of strange, the things that happened around the school then, but it was fun. So then the next year, after I'd worked in Chicago and came back, I was employed in Casey, and I taught the 4th grade for 10 years in Casey, and of course could come back and stay at home. And then after that, it was 1941, I went to Watsika, Illinois, where I taught. I remember, of course, where Harbor Day was, and I was on my way to Indianapolis to go on to Watsika when that happened. And I remember teaching the 5th and 6th grade combination there, and teaching ancient history. And I thought, oh my, this is just something, I should be teaching something else. But of course, we could not tell about the Death March and some of those things that were happening to MacArthur, in the Philippines. You couldn't talk about that to the students. We issued gasoline stamps so that you could travel, and I could travel back and forth pretty well but that was 100 miles from Casey. So after that, I left and taught for 6 years at Robinson, which was closer to Casey. And there I taught 6th grade, and then since I was, by that time, had changed my course to English and art, especially. My employer decided, and the board decided, that I should teach art. So then from then on, I taught art for 4 years. That time was 1948. I decided to stop teaching and go back and get a bachelor's. So I went to Eastern again, and I finished in just the fall term. By Christmas, I was out. But by this time, my parents had, of course, left Casey and had gone, and they were in Altamont, Illinois during the war. And so then Dad decided that he had 43 and a half years there, 43 and a half years there. So he decided to sell the farm, although we were living in Altamont at that time, to sell the farm completely and go to California. So I was on my own then for a while and finished teaching in Robinson. But I had my degree in 1948, and the ceremony was in 1949. Then I worked on my master's for 2 years. And in 52, I had my master's from Terre Haute. I think that...
You had mentioned that during the war you couldn't really talk about the death marches and what was going on. Were you not allowed to by the board, or was that just
it was in our meetings we would decide, and they thought young children, it was even as now, you know, we have to think about what we tell children.
And how old were the children you were teaching at that time?
Fifth and sixth graders. So
They were
10, 11, 12.
Right. Right. Okay. Then after you finished teaching, did you work other places? I know a lot of people who retire, then they work other places too. You had mentioned in our talking that you had even worked at Supermet here in Marshall.
Yes, I did.
Was that during the summertime, perhaps, or?
Yes, it was for a short time during the summer.
I see.
I finally decided it was not for me. The woman who was teaching me to work there, she was very, very good, and she said, "Now I'm going to leave you in the office, and I want you to take charge." But I didn't know there was a plant back of this in which there were many people working, and they would call and say, "Will you tell my wife so and so?" And I didn't know that. And then there were many machines. The computer was not in yet. I did have a contometer to work with, and we sent the messages by a machine. I don't know what it was. It was complicated for me, and so I didn't work there very long. I had, during the summer terms, when I was visiting in Ohio one summer, worked at dime stores there for, maybe 3 weeks or something. And so after I finished my bachelor's, I had time before I went to Decatur to work in a dime store at Terre Haute. I always thought, growing up as a child, I wanted to work in a dime store. I thought they had the most beautiful girls in the world. And of course they dressed some of the ribbons and some of their hats and things. It was very, very funny. I think that's maybe all there.
You had mentioned remembering Pearl Harbor. Were there any other historical events that stand out in your mind as you're thinking back on past times?
First, the flood in West Terre Haute. Although I was not 6 yet, I remember the flood. And the motorboats were going right down our street. And it came within 2 inches of the floor. The water was in our basement. Dad did not go to work because the tower where he worked, the Vigo Tower, was within sight of our house. About 3 blocks we were from the railroad. And so on the day that the flood rushed over that part of West Terre Haute, Dad went up on the porch of the second floor of our house, and he could see the tower going over. The man that was on duty in the morning was there, and he jumped into his car because it went across the tracks and everything, took the tower right out and put it down in the pit, which was right behind the tower. So that was an experience. Of course, I didn't remember seeing it, but that happened. And, of course, that was in 1913. So that was a big event. then I would say that probably, a train wreck near the tower where Dad worked was very interesting to me. I don't think there's any. I think we think of the calamities maybe as some things to remember. In 26, see, in the 20s, called the Roaring 20s, why I was in high school and then on to college for a while. Of course, Lindbergh through the Atlantic. I remember that was something. I can remember when planes would go, they would follow the railroad track from St. Louis to Terre Haute, and you'd see many planes going over. That was the first thing. We would see dirigibles going over when they were first came in. Then, I suppose the next big date was Pearl Harbor, and I suppose everybody remembers where they were. I was thinking, of course, I think maybe when President Roosevelt died after the war was something to remember. The next thing probably was, well, I would think it would be,
Is there anything more you want to add, Dana?
well, I think my father died in 1963, and sometime after that, we had the man on the moon. I remember standing out in the yard and saying to Mother, now there is a man on the moon. And then Mother passed away in 1969. And, of course, I had come to Marshall to live because Mother wanted to get out of Terre Haute. So I came to Marshall. In 1966, I was in Marshall. And I came to Marshall because it was in a good location. It was the size town I would like. Mother knew the people. We could, go to Terre Haute. We could go to West York, West Union, where we lived. And so I would say that, and so now for about 30 years, I lived close to the railroad, and all these times we were close to US 40, and now right now I'm living where Old 40 runs right beside the apartment.
So this is a good place to live.
It is. I enjoy it.
I know that during this time you've seen a lot of changes historically and with our modern conveniences. Are there any particular modern conveniences that you particularly enjoyed or particularly remembered when they were first put on the market, so to speak?
Well, yes, of course I can remember. And radio came in. That was great. And we always had music. Dad finally got a player piano after we didn't play the piano so much. And we had Victrolas, and we had, then of course we had television when it first came in. Now we have better television and cable and all of that. And of course I haven't gone into computer work at all. But I believe that...
Is there any particular convenience that you like the best, would you say is your favorite new invention, so to speak?
I just think that, see, I've been retired now for several years, and so I think that just the television is probably the thing that I like. I've enjoyed all of the activities here in Marshall a great deal.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you very much, Dana. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you might like to mention?
Well, I must say that I have had relations here in Marshall that many years that we have had. I've had my cousins and aunts and uncles for that reason. I've had friends to come and go, but I have enjoyed my Marshall residence.
Well, thank you, and we've enjoyed having you here. Thank you so much for allowing us to interview you today, Dana.
Thank you.